Stressed Out isn't a prequel, it's the exact moment the Clancy loop resets. Nico's origin story. After staring at the ending of City Walls music video and trying to process the reversed audio cues leading back into the Blurry Face era, like the Heavy Dirty Soul, I assume, sound at the end, a massive realization just hit me about Stressed Out. We all know Stressed Out is canonically Nico's song on the official dema map, but I think the video is actually showing us the exact moment Clancy turns into Nico. 1. The birth of a bishop. The song isn't just about general adult anxiety, it depicts a creative child being broken by real-world algorithmic pressures. Wake up, you need to make money. To survive the suffocating stress, Clancy's brain creates a defensive coping mechanism. Absolute rigid control. He literally invents the persona of Nico to protect his vulnerable childhood self. The red eyes at the end of the video aren't him being attacked, it's the moment the transformation is complete and the bishop takes over. This is interesting. Again, it ties into something that I've kind of thought for a while and isn't unique to me, that Blurry Face is a creation of Tyler as a way to cope with something. I didn't necessarily take it down these lines or down this road. Think about it in these lines. The end of City Walls loops into Stressed Out. Musically, it loops into Heavy Dirty Soul, but let's hear this out. At the end of City Walls, Clancy succumbs to the temptation of absolute control, true, puts on a bishop's hood, and the universe resets. Stressed Out is the immediate regression. The childhood memories being corrupted in that video are Clancy's own instant past being locked away by his new rigid bishop mindset. So perhaps this is saying almost at the moment that he becomes the bishop, the new bishop, that's when we see Blurry Face take control in Stressed Out. It's like a almost parallel defining moment. 3, the Torchbearer's tragic past. The Keon's connection. This completely recontextualizes the Torchbearer. In the Toker video, we see a glimpse of a reality where Josh acted like a bishop. If the universe keeps resetting, Josh was likely Keon's in a previous cycle. We have considered and discussed the idea of Josh being Keon's before. Perhaps this theory prompted a comment that ended up in a Perligo Ponders episode. I don't know. Again, I have serious reservations about the idea that the Torchbearer was a bishop at one point. I think, again, not a lot of evidence, and also kind of changes, which this poster does acknowledge, kind of changes who we understand the Torchbearer to be, if he was a bishop at one point. Let's keep going. It explains why Keons was the only quote-unquote good bishop who protected Clancy and ultimately sacrificed himself to help him escape. When Josh walks away in heartbreak at the end of City Walls, he refuses the hood because he has already been there. He is an immortal guide, forced to watch Clancy turn into Nico, regress back to the Tricycles and Stressed Out, and start the whole loop again. I wonder if the Tricycles are a metaphor for the fact that only 3 cycles have actually been in play in this entire story, or that 3 cycles are currently at play. Just get completely far-fetched with these theories. Really read into every single detail. I'm not saying this person's doing it, by the way. This is a completely unrelated joke I'm making, but what if the Tricycles, the fact that they are tricycles, 3 cycles, are telling us that in the story, in the Trench story, the Trench saga, there are 3 cycles at play. There's the letter cycle, the visual cycle, and the future drag path cycle. Anyway, again, not claiming that this person, late Fennel, is claiming that. What do you guys think? Does this bridge the gap between Blurry Face and Breach for anyone else? I mean, I think this is an interesting and certainly a thought-out theory. I think the problem is it doesn't actually bridge the gap between Breach and Blurry Face. It creates a new one because it kind of pulls us away from Heavy Dirty Soul, which starts the cycle and starts Blurry Face, right? If we understand Blurry Face to Breach as sort of the canonic 5 albums of the saga, Blurry Face starts with Heavy Dirty Soul, and that's the first music video. And then the last one is City Walls, and that brings us back into Heavy Dirty Soul, which starts Blurry Face. To then bypass that and bring us to Stressed Out instead, which isn't as clearly a lore video, seems like it's creating new complications. So that would be my first criticism, is that if you're trying to bridge a gap between these albums, there is already a bridge that covers the gap between the albums, and this is creating new complications for that. It doesn't necessarily discount the theory, it's just I don't see how it accomplishes that particular thing. In terms of understanding Stressed Out's place in the story. So, okay, first of all, I think it's fair to say that Blurry Face takes over Clancy. We know that. Does that happen in Stressed Out? Potentially, I'm willing to be convinced of that. But I think what we see in Stressed Out and Fairly Local and videos like that, which I think are maybe lore adjacent, Routines of the Night is similar in some ways to this as well. Maybe lore adjacent tangentially or related in a parallel way to the Dema story, where we have this thing with Blurry Face going on and all of that. You know, we see the struggle between Tyler and Blurry Face, but it's not in the story the same way we see Clancy versus Nico. And so because of that, we could see these non-story videos that are part of the Blurry Face saga that seem to have Blurry Face in them without necessarily having Nico in them as being related in a parallel fashion to the main story of Dema. And so what we see playing out in one of the story videos could be playing out in Stressed Out as well in that video, but in a real world sense almost. In terms of Blurryface being someone that is created by Tyler or Clancy to cope with something or work through something that he's struggling with, I'm on board with that. I don't know if it was necessarily childhood memories so much as something else. I don't know. I don't know that we can know. I understand where childhood memories are coming from given the context of Stressed Out. So you may be right about that. That part I do think makes a lot of sense. The whole Torchbearer tragic past, again, I don't think it makes really any sense from the perspective of who the Torchbearer is, as we currently understand him, to say that he was a bishop in the past. It just seems to completely undermine. And again, you do acknowledge that it recontextualizes who the Torchbearer is, but then you don't give a lot of defense as to how we can still understand this in connection to what we've seen with the Torchbearer previously. I'm struggling to accept that part of this idea because, again, the Torchbearer is very much presented as someone who has seen Clancy go through the cycle time and again without being part of the cycle himself. If I'm missing something and you have evidence beyond the fact that it would be kind of explain Keon's to have him be the Torchbearer, I'd be curious to see that other evidence. I think the explanation for why Keon's is the good bishop is not that he's the Torchbearer, but that he's just a previous version of Clancy who became a bishop, but didn't so fully. He's like a closer version that got closer to breaking out than the previous ones, and is less under the control of Blurryface than other ones have been. And that's why he's a little bit more sympathetic. So all in all, I would say I like how this is thought out. I think you end up complicating things a little bit at the end. I don't agree with the Torchbearer being Keon's, but I don't hate the idea that there could be a way in which, like, I'm not saying I'm fully convinced, but I'm not convinced, if that makes sense, that there could be a way that what we see playing out in Stressed Out and Fairly Local and things like that could have parallels to what we see playing out in the dream world of Dema at the same time in something like City Walls. And so as he wakes up at the end as Blurryface, right, that figure opens his eyes and they're red and he's got the Blurryface eyes, that could be connecting to him donning the Nova Bishop cloak within his subconscious. Sure, that would be a really kind of interesting way to consider the Dema world versus the real world and dive into something there. I don't know if Late Fennel is going to see this, but if you do, I'd be curious to kind of hear more of your thoughts on this. I think it's an interesting start, but again, I think there are some things like the Torchbearer being Keon's that just don't make a lot of sense to me at all.